Hey everyone, and welcome to another Sasquatch Theory podcast. On this episode, we have DR. DR and his wife live in Kentucky, and they have been experiencing Bigfoot activity for many years now. They live on a homestead out in the middle of the forest, and they claim that they have experienced some strange phenomenon that cannot be explained. Kentucky has had many Bigfoot reports in the past, and I believe it's going to continue for many years. The forest is very ancient, and it's a beautiful state, honestly. If you guys have a Bigfoot encounter that you would like to share with me here on the channel, please contact me sometime at sasquatchtheory@outlook.com. And with all that being said, let's dive straight into DR's Bigfoot encounters from the state of Kentucky. All right, DR, welcome to Sasquatch Theory. How are you doing today?
Doing very well, thank you.
Yeah, DR, it's a pleasure to have you on the show, and I'm glad that you contacted me to share these encounters and experiences. If you would, tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got into all this.
Well, I was raised in Kentucky and wound up traveling through about 40 different states for a long time, for over two decades. And basically, I've made my way through the trades, and I also mined, or what they would say, prospected for quartz crystal in Arkansas for about 2 decades. And so I spent a lot of time all around the country in many different forests, national forests, state forests, preserves, up and down the Appalachian Trail several times. I haven't done the whole thing, but about 700 miles worth. But basically wound up coming off of 23 years of being on the road, and wound up meeting my wife. We got together. We'd been together for 7 years. For the last 5 years, we have created a homestead in the mountains of eastern Kentucky. And we started with a tent out here. We got about 25 acres, and it's rugged terrain. We started with a tent up on our tallest hill, and we've been completely off grid for 5 years out here, which is basically how I lived my life all over the country in the forest. So, of course, I'm not taking generators and electricity and everything with me into the forest. So I've been living off of the grid for, I guess, about 28 years now. And my wife had never had that experience. She was up for it, which there's not a whole lot of women in the world that will go live in a tent in the middle of the mountains with you. But she trusted my experience, and we had a good enough relationship. We were able to persevere. We've been off grid for 5 years out here together. Like I said, moved into the camper. We were there for two winters. In a week from now, on August 24th, it'll be 2 years in our cabin that we built together, and hauled all the wood from the sawmills, all that stuff, stained it, and did the whole process. And we built a cabin and a bathhouse and an outhouse. And so now to get into where my life actually feeds into what people want to hear. That's a little bit of background about who I am, what I'm doing, and my experience. So my first Sasquatch encounter took me by complete surprise. It was something that I couldn't shake off of me for a while because it was so close and I was 24 years old in 1999, and a friend and I were in North Carolina on the Appalachian Trail. And I remember the road that we went off of was called Hempseed Hill Road. We went out there. We wound up, I believe, hiking about 5 miles south from wherever the parking lot was. We walked about 5 miles south. He set up his tent with his dog, and I slept next to the fire pit. I just being in the middle. It was probably June or July, something like that, and nothing had occurred to me that was out of the ordinary. We went to sleep. We hiked the miles. We made food. I had my guitar with me. We played music. We just did our thing, and then I woke up at about I'd say probably about 5 o'clock in the morning, just as dawn was taking over the night. I woke up. I stoked up the fire. I got my guitar out, started strumming, playing some music. And then I'd say about 160 to 180 feet away from me, up on the sloping ridge above me, as the mountain, goes and slopes upward away from where we were camped at. Little ways up there, not far from me, I heard a bunch of thick rustling around. And it stopped. It was over top of me sitting there playing guitar. I could hear it. So I stopped playing and just kept hearing this rustling about. And what it triggered on me psychologically was, it sounded to me like there was 3 or 4 or 5 people moving about right there. And so my young 24-year-old mind, I'm 49 now. This is 25 years ago. But my young mind immediately kind of went back to the whole deliverance thing. Like, oh my God, there's there's some wild hicks up here in the hills. Oh my God. And we're miles deep on the trail, on the Appalachian Trail. And so I kind of got a little paranoid there for a second. Like, oh my gosh, I said, hello, anybody up there? Trying to get some response and trying to clarify what's happening. And there was no response. It just was continued rustling around. And so it kind of piqued me up into survival mode at that point. So I had a large walking stick with me, and I started putting it into the fire that I had started at dawn. I started getting the fire up on my walking stick, and I was like, well, if nothing else, I've got a burning spear to try and stab you with if somebody's going to come at me. That's what my thought was. So I started grinding and put into a fine point as best as I could, kind of in between the rocks, trying to spear it off a little bit and catch it on fire. And I guess whoever was standing up there saw me doing this and understood what I was doing. And the next thing I knew was I heard the wind, and I do mean this, like the sheer force of wind air braking happening by a large branch, a very large branch, being swung and smashed against a tree. And I guarantee you that branch that I heard shatter weighed at least twice as much as I weigh, or it weighed more than I do. It was a very large branch, and I heard the wind behind it, and it shattered against the tree. And then, of course, I'm standing there thinking to myself, oh my God, what could cause that? And as I'm having that thought, it howled at me. And I'm not going to say I'm going to be a great representation, but I can give you an idea what it sounded like. It was kind of like, ooh, like that. And as I sat there and heard that, I thought there's not a bear that can pick up a branch and do that. And that definitely doesn't sound like a bear. And then I remember kind of at the end of the howl, it kind of went up. It kind of crescendoed up a little bit at the end, like a woo at the end. And at that point, once that happened, I'm just psychologically just like, oh my God, what the heck is going on? So I ran over, unzipped my buddy's tent, stuck my head in there and said, Brad, you need to get up now. There's something out here. And he's like, he's real slow to wake up. And I kept shaking him. I was like, wake up now. And he saw the seriousness when he looked at me. I said, get up. There is something here. I said, something just yelled at me and smashed a branch against the tree, and it's right there. And he wakes up and he gets his senses, and he looks at me. He goes, so what? And I explain it again. He goes, well, didn't you hear the freight train come through the campsite down the trail last night? And I said, what? And I'm a very hard sleeper. He looked at me. He goes, I looked at my watch and it was 2:19 a.m. and it sounded like a freight train of 7 people came flying through the trail. And his dog that he had at the time, named Buddy, his dog is about a 110-pound dog. He said it was everything he could do to keep his dog inside his tent from busting his tent down. He said his dog was going nuts. I slept through the whole thing. I didn't hear a dang thing. And he told me that this had happened at 2:19, and I looked at him and we looked at the watch and it was like 6:20 or something like that. I was like, we need to get the hell out of here now. So we packed up and we left. We walked back out to the car. We drove. We're like, well, we had like 2 or 3 days we had planned to camp together. Like, well, let's go somewhere else. So we got out a topographical map. We looked and we saw a place that was like 15 or 18 miles north of there that was off on a whole nother set of ridges off on another mountain. We're like, well, let's go explore this. So we get out there. We drove up there for a few hours. So it's like, 2 hours, get all the way out from where we were and drive up to the new place. We get out there. We go out. We go walking out these ridges. Get way out there. We spent the day, spent the night. The only thing that I noticed that was very strange that happened that night was that we were both sitting around the fire and we were very attuned to all the sounds of the forest. And at one foul swoop, everything, it was like someone took the volume knob and turned it down to 0. Like, say it was at 9, they took it and turned it down to 0. It went down, everything shut down and went completely silent. And we both took note of that. And we're like, wow, that's strange. Everything just went quiet. Well, that's all that really happened that night. Well, we wake up the next day. He had to get me back to where I was going. He had to get back home. So we get back to the car, and it's like a 2-hour walk. We walk back out from the ridge, get all the way back to where we parked, get back out to the car. And there's this, I want to say about a 90-year-old man with his grandson out there. And they're parked with their old, like, 1978 Ford truck. And they're parked there chopping and hauling up and splitting and putting wood in the back of their truck. And we got back probably about 10:30 in the morning back to the car. And he looks over at us. I mean, this guy was old. And he looks over at us as we're packing up. I'll never forget, we're packing up his Chevy Beretta. We're packing it up in the trunk. And he goes, oh, you boys went out there on the ridges last night, huh? I said, yes, sir, we did. Yeah. And he stops and he looks around both sides of his head, looks back at us. And he goes, you see anything interesting out there? And Brad and I just kind of looked at each other like, no. and he just kind of looked around and he goes, huh, you boys have a great day. And so we didn't understand what was going on, but we started talking about it and looking at the map that we were, using. And it was like, oh, the old man knows that this is going on out here. The old man knew. That's why he said that to us. But this was my very first encounter, so I didn't have any real good reference point because I was still bewildered by what the heck had just happened to me that morning previously. So that was my very first encounter. And it was very close. I mean, it was like, 160, 175 feet away. It wasn't far at all. It was that close. And so now I'm going to jump forward to what I have to attribute to my next experiences, which was going back up to my first spiritual stomping ground, which is the Red River Gorge in eastern Kentucky mountains in the Daniel Boone National Forest. It's in Sector B of the Daniel Boone. And so I've been going out there to those woods since I was 19 years old and since 94. And back in 2016, I had 2 dogs at the time, and a girlfriend was with me. And we went out to what they call Frisbee Field. And anybody that knows about Indian Creek and the Red River Gorge, you know exactly where I'm talking about. Went out to Frisbee Field, and we set up our tent, and it's a big field. People have been camping there for decades. And we could barely keep the tent structure together while both of the dogs went nuts inside of it because there were large boulders being thrown into the creek just after dark. And it persisted for the whole event lasted probably for 35 or 40 minutes. I mean, it wasn't just a 1 second thing. It went on and on and on and on and on. And I finally walked out with the dogs on the leashes and tried to kind of quiet the scene. And eventually everything kind of mellowed back out. But yeah, there was definitely some very large boulders being thrown in the creek there. And we were probably 120 feet from the creek, 125 feet from the creek, something like that. And so that was like my next feeling, like, oh, this is happening again. But I haven't actually gotten to what everybody actually should hear. I'm just telling you what it was like as a regular person, if you will, in air quotes, a regular person to go through life and have these encounters. Now that we've been here since 2019 on our land for the last 5 years, there's been more experiences here and more physical objects and everything else that I can describe and talk about that I've encountered and have actually been, I think, at this point, kind of working with. I think there's a whole family that actually of it's so weird to put like, a generic term like Sasquatch or Bigfoot on something like this, because I believe that they're just like you and I. they're actually more like a conscious being than they are some wild animal or creature. So I don't feel quite proper addressing them with such a generic term myself personally, because I think that they're just like us, where they have emotion and they have the ability to have a good day and a bad day. So that being said, I sent you pictures yesterday, Miguel, and I think thank you for allowing me to come onto your show. I think this is actually a great platform to help support people in different ways. The pictures I showed you were of the X structure that is about it probably from my cabin door to walk over there. I can walk over there in probably 30 seconds or so. It's not far, maybe 20 seconds. It's not far away. It's tucked in the woods. It's been there obviously for decades, because some of the wood is now rotting and has fallen off, but it was an X brace put in the crux of a dual spire tree that's been there for decades, and that's what I was showing you. We've had so many different structures built on this place. It took us a while to understand just what was happening here. The first real thing that made me think of once we established ourselves on this land and we're very comfortable and whatnot, there's a waterfall from the cabin. There's about a 22-foot waterfall. It's about a 4-minute walk through the woods. There's a trail that goes through, takes you there. Well, I took a nautical boat tying rope that can sustain, water and whatnot and weather, and I made knots every so often on it so that you could descend down to the waterfall off of the cliffside there. So you walk down the rope, and I figured I'm just going to let the rest of this 50-foot rope just dangle here, because who cares? Who cares about this black rope laying here? And this was, like 4 years ago. And it was the first thing that really tweaked my noodle as far as somebody doing something out here that I wasn't aware of. And that black rope that I let dangle off the cliffside there at the bottom, the last 12 feet, 15 feet of it was wrapped up around a dead chunk of log and placed and tucked back under the rock cropping there and placed back in there. And that was done probably maybe a month after I put the rope there. And I thought to myself, who's going to walk out in the woods and wrap up the end of this rope? Who's going to care about that? And so that was like the first thing. And then, of course, all of the structures that we've been seeing for years out here, we have about 8 different logging roads that crisscross our land. And we've cleaned them all out. We've cleared them all out so that we have a built trail system that traverses all of our land. And so as we kept on clearing the land out, we kept finding more and more of A-frame and X-frame and TP-frame structures all over the place, in trees, next to trees, leaning on trees, in branches, trees being pulled over sideways and hooked to other trees, all these different things. And we kept seeing it for years over and over. The biggest one that honestly kind of made me realize that someone is communicating to me happened, I'd say, I think this was about 2.5 years ago is when it showed up. We have a graveyard that's on our property that has a very small puppy. It has the ashes of my best friend who was actually murdered in 2018. I have his ashes there. And I have a grave for my 14-and-a-half-year-old dog that I traveled the country with. That dog went to 36 states with me. And she's there. And so it's our graveyard. And I'd say about 35 to 40 feet away from the graveyard, in the middle of one of the lumber roads that we traverse, that we use for our trail system, in the middle of it was probably a 10 to 12-year-old pine tree that was completely bent and arced and then pinned down by a very large chunk of wood, very large branch. And then it was actually 3 branches that created a square with the bent pine tree. And it was almost like a perfectly perpendicular square. And it was built right in the middle of our lumber road that we use to walk down to our creek and to where the graveyard is. And I actually understood at that point, like, this is definitely happening, that this has been here longer than us. And I think it understood the sacredness of what was happening there at the graveyard. And I think it was building something to, some type of structure for its own purpose in accordance with what we had done. and I left it there for about 8 months. And I didn't feel like walking around it anymore. That's why I picked it up and moved it. Another fun one that's happened out here is that a year ago, in 2 days, is my wife's and mine first anniversary. We got on August 19th, we got married a year ago. And for our wedding, we had created these fruit platters. Well, I had enough fruit that I'd chopped up, and I never made it to the final honeydew. I'd already chopped up enough honeydew. I had one whole honeydew that I left sitting outside on the picnic table that I was letting ripen up, and I was going to cut it up one day. I just never got to it. That honeydew sat on that table for about 12 days. And then there was a day where we both left and we were gone at the same time. And when we came back about 2 hours later, that honeydew was gone. And I don't think a person's gonna, we live a mile and a half deep in the woods off the main road. It takes about 10 to 12 minutes to get from the main highway out to where we live off grid. We're completely isolated, tucked away. And the only way we have cell phones and stuff like that is because we use our vehicles to charge them. We're 100% off grid. We don't have any electricity. We haul our own spring water, all that stuff. So yeah, that was kind of funny because I don't think a person would walk a mile and a half deep in the woods to go take a honeydew. That surely they'd take something else valuable from my home instead of a honeydew. And I don't think a raccoon in broad daylight or something like that is even able to pick up a honeydew and walk away with it. And about 4 months ago, it was the first time I ever actually got a visual. It's the first time. We've heard plenty of rock knocks, we've heard tree knocks, we've heard howls. We've don't let me forget if I don't mention. I have to tell you the story about the light, but we've had all these different experiences all out here. This is all true. We have no reason to fabricate this stuff. I got my first visual about 4 months ago, I guess it was. We were clearing out a place on our driveway, which is quite a ways from the cabin. And we were way up towards the beginning of the driveway. And we were clearing out for a flower bed. And it was a light drizzle, gray morning. It was probably April. And it was like 9:30 in the morning. And we're clearing this out. We knew it wasn't going to rain too hard, but we wanted to get it done. So we're out there for like an hour doing this. And I believe one of the juveniles, and the reason why I say that is because it was making no sound, and based on what I saw visually, I think this was a younger one, and had walked about 20 feet from my wife. And our dog at the time was about 50 feet away, and it walked right by my wife, and my wife thought it was the dog because she heard it breathing, and she said Luna, like that, and I looked over and Luna was a good 50 something feet away, and she was like, something's here. And about the time she said that, Luna comes running over and prancing. She wasn't aggressive at all. She was hopping like a bunny. If you can picture a dog hopping like that, she was hopping with her tail up in the air, and she was not making a sound, as if she caught the scent and she understood what was happening, and that it was like her friend. Like my dog was not aggressive, and this is a dog that literally attacks coyote packs. I'm just saying, this is a dog that actually attacks coyotes. This dog happily was greeting what was there. And as soon as I saw my dog coming over, and I saw the reaction on my wife and what was happening, I looked over, and my vision finally caught it out of the greenscape of the leaves. I saw this silvery gray on top of black fur. My eyes picked it up. And I saw it. It was about 45 to 50 feet away right in front of me through a slight thicket of young trees. And I saw the shoulder and the back turn and spin away from me and was gone in 1 second. That, as far as a visual, that's the only time I've ever had a visual. And it just happened to walk right up on us. I think that they actually trust us. And there's some other things I would like to share with you in the future about why I think that, but there's a whole backstory too that I'm not going to get into right now. But another, the light, right after we built this cabin, we had been in this cabin for about 3 to 4 months. It was just the onset of winter. And I was up at about 5 a.m., as I sometimes am, and I was making my coffee. We're off grid. It's dark. I have a lantern. We have battery powered lights with remote controls. I turned in with dimmer switches. So I turned on my dim lighting so my wife could continue sleeping. I was making my coffee, standing here in the dim light. It's a little bit chilly, and I had not gotten the place completely sealed up yet. It actually took me, I did this in a primitive style. This cabin is very primitive as far as construction and the way I sealed it up. It took me about 8 months to completely seal the inner and outer walls the way I did it. And so I didn't have it all the way sealed up. So she was underneath a very, very thick blanket that I got in Maine, a very thick winter blanket, another blanket, and a sheet. And she's underneath all of those. Her whole body, her head, everything laying there. She's not completely asleep because I'm rummaging around, but she's laying there nestled in bed. And out of nowhere, as I was kind of spinning away from making my coffee and turning towards the center of the cabin, a very, very bright, yellowy, very whitish, bright white light came through our south facing window and entered into the cabin and lit the entire cabin up for 1 second as it like dispersed itself through the cabin. This light just, as fast as it came through the window, was as fast as it shone and then was gone. But it was so bright that it lit up my entire cabin, and my wife underneath the thick blanket, the other cover, and the sheet with her head and her eyes closed under all of that. I said, "What the hell was that?" And she said, "That was so bright that I saw it through my eyelids." And there's the latest event that's happened out here. I feel like we live with a whole clan out here, guys. Before I tell you about the July 5th, let me tell you about the one that I got very close to out here on accident again. But I believe this is an adult. I'm talking like this guy's got to be 9-10 feet big, like 500-600 pounds. It has to be humongous. This is when we were living in a camper before we had the whole homestead built. I was walking about 6 in the morning in the summertime, walking down the hill to come down here, and I think I was getting ready to do some more prep work down here. And I was quietly walking about 6 in the morning at dawn down the hill, and I came to walk up down this road. And as I got to the junction of the two roads to take a right to come in here, as I got to there, it was probably 150 feet away from me. Whatever was there immediately sprinted away from me, and I'm talking smashed trees and branches and crushed everything beneath its feet, crushed everything in its way, shattered. I could hear branches ripping off of live trees. Everything was being shattered as this ran away from me down into the creek and away, and it was gone out of my sound within 3 to 4 seconds. I could no longer hear it. It was that fast. It shattering though everything in its way out of me, to get away from me. It just that was the first time that I think that I realized that I got very close out here. But we kind of joked about the idea. And then eventually, once you get joking with the idea between yourselves of like, of course, it's Bigfoot, it's like, well, is there some crazy mountain person that's out here doing all these things that we observe? Is there actually someone that's living through the negative temperatures of winter and living through the 90s of the summer and doing it? Of course, it's not. Like, of course, there's not a wild mountain man out here doing these things out here. And so, but you have to understand, like, it took us a long time to wrap our minds around what we were experiencing because we knew that we're not crazy, but that we can't explain these things, and that the only thing that it points to is what people are going to call Bigfoot or Sasquatch. Once you rule out a crazy person living in your woods for years doing these things, the only logical step I think I can personally make is that this is what it is. And after having a visual, like I said, about 4 months ago, it only confirmed it to me that we've actually been experiencing this the whole time. And what happened to me this recent July 5th of 24, my wife was out of town. Excuse me, I'm going to take a drink here a second. My wife was out of town and I was here, and just so happened that I was here for the 4th of July weekend by myself with my pets. And at a certain point, I could hear people up in the valley because this valley that we live up above acts like a big sounding dish. The sounds just carry. It's like an amplifier out here. And so I'm hearing this group of like 5 guys, probably a half mile, 3/4 of a mile away from me, having a good time doing their celebration still on the 5th. And I was inside the cabin just relaxing. It's probably 10:30 at night. And the next thing I hear, and this was what really made me think that I was actually being talked to and communicated to. This is how personal this was. This is what makes me personally think that it's actually getting personal now. On the 5th, that night, when these guys are hooting and hollering doing their thing, I'm alone up here in the dark, minding my own business, doing my thing here in the cabin, and I can hear them off in the distance. Well, out of nowhere, down in the creek, in the valley, I can hear a call that I have certain different wild calls that I do just to express myself. I'm a musician, I sing, I like to be vocal at times, and I like to shout and hooray, different ways in the woods when the moment is happening. And there's different ones that I've done throughout my years, like you got some people do all their different calls in the wild. And one of mine is a typical like woohoo, one of those. Well, I hear that first, I think was the woohoo, and I heard it right down in the valley. It was right below me. I'm talking 100 yards away or whatever, and I hear whoa, and it's right down there, right in front of me, and I'm listening up on the hill to these guys, and they all stop. And they think that it's a person out here woohooing at them. So they start woohooing back. And then the next one, it was like one of those. And it does that. And these people, I can hear them cracking up. They're thinking there's some guy out here having a fun time with them. I'm up on the mountaintop listening to all of it. It does a second call. Like the second one, I was like, those are both my calls. Those are things that I do out here. And then they're all cracking up. I can hear them laughing. And then they start calling back again. And then it does a third one. And there's like a third different type of call. And if I'm not going to do each one, but it's like there's these different types of calls that only I have heard myself do ever in my life. And I do them out here at specific times if something's very joyous or we're feeling very free and happy, where I'm letting out that call. And there's like 4 different ones. And it did each of the 4 calls, and each time those guys were howling back, doing different similar things, howling back, cracking up. But at the same time, I'm sitting here on my deck at this point cracking up at everybody, because I'm like, me and Sasquatch are the only ones that actually know what's happening right now. And I immediately called a good friend of mine up in Pittsburgh that I've known for 34 years. I immediately called him because he's all big into Bigfoot, and I told him what just happened, and he was cracking up. He's like, "Yeah, I've heard stories about the mimics in the woods and the mimicking things or other people and stuff." He verified it with me, but that was the most recent, out loud thing that had happened was 5 weeks ago. But this has just been an unfolding of all these different things that have taken place, and um, honestly feel like that was a showing of true understanding um, between the two of us, because I don't know why else it would choose to mimic me like that. And it showed me that it's been paying attention for years, and that they have that much of a memory recall, and that there is, like, I do believe, like I play piano. I have a 1969 Kimball piano in my cabin, and when you press the volume pedal down, the sound rings throughout the cabin out into the woods. My wife said you can hear it up at the camper, which is 250, 300 feet away. She said you can hear it all the way up there. This place is like a big echo amplifier dish. And I also have a keyboard that I take out onto the deck, and I charge up a car battery, and then I take it out there with an inverter, and I plug my keyboard into the inverter, and I play out on the deck, and we play hand drums out here for them. And we take bananas and we put them up in trees, and the next day the bananas are gone. Like, we've been reciprocating this thing for so long, but that was the first time that it was actually that personalized, because it it kind of made all the hair stand up on me. Just like nobody else knows what my calls are except for my wife and my dogs. Like, nobody else can do that unless you've been monitoring me for 5 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And DR, if you could tell me a little bit more about this juvenile encounter, can you describe the features on the creature?
Like I said, it was a 2-second glimpse. It was if its head was looking at both of us, I think, but saw that he understood, she understood that I had taken notice immediately after the sounds had stopped, and my wife heard the breathing about 20 feet right in front of her through the small thicket of trees. She heard the breathing, and she thought that it was our dog at first, and I recognized that the dog was 50 feet behind, but it all happened so quickly. And like I said, my dog was not vicious at all. She was actually very friendly as in her approach, and with her nose in the air and tail in the air. And then I locked in and saw the unfamiliar thing in front of me, and that's when I saw the spinning. All I got to see was the shoulder and the back. That's all I got to see, but I can see in my mind's eye what the detail, like I said earlier, it was a silvery, shiny gray type of fur on over top of black fur. I could tell that the accents were on top, and that it was like very well kept and clean. It was not, this was not a dirty creature. This was shiny, like it was almost like the light was obviously reflecting, and that's what caught my eye to its attention. And once it understood, I verified and saw that this was in front of me. It just as fast as I recognized, it spun its shoulder, and all I saw was its shoulder and its back spin and run away. That's all I saw, because it was in a small grove of trees. That's how why it was able to come up without being seen. It was just heard first by my wife. But that is definitely the closest encounter that we are aware of, which probably comes within 20 feet of my wife. But that also, I think, attests to a level of trust and understanding, because I honestly think that they know that we're protecting them by the fact that we are the people that we are, that are living with our land the way that we are. We're not tearing every tree down. I can walk off my deck and touch 6 trees just about. It's like we have forest all around us. I only took down what I had to create what we needed. We are in the thick of it. And so if you walk, 35 feet off my door, you're in the thick, you're in the forest.
Yeah, that is very fascinating. And it makes me wonder if your dog has interacted with these creatures before and he was already familiarized with them.
Yep, Luna knows them. That's why her tail was in the air and she was not aggressive at all. She was hopping like a bunny as if her friend was over there. And
Yeah,
my dog's very sweet and very smart, but she is very tough. I have personally watched her take on 2 dogs twice her size. 2 of them. She put them both in check. That's the kind of dog I'm talking about.
yeah.
She's super smart, super sweet. She knows what's going on. Yes, she knows that they're here.
And why do you
And
think these things interact with people and specifically you guys?
I honestly think that that depends on the type of person you are. I think it depends on what your intent, what your background, what your humility, what your conscious level is, what your connection to the spirit and God realm is. I think it has to do with all of these things as to whether what type of encounter you're actually going to have. And those, therefore, like I said, chronologically from 99 to 2016 to the recent, um, I've developed, just as any growing creature should, I've developed. So therefore, my experiences have leveled up as well. And so I think that there's a very much of an understanding between my family and their family, that we actually, by us showing up here, actually did them a service, because we're not tearing the place apart. The last time this place was logged was in 1930. We still have a tree down by our creek that's about 500 years old. It's massive. We've got several big ones, but this one's about 500 years old that they left to keep the creek intact there. But this forest has been here for a very long time. And I would like to tell you something real quick, just because if anybody else out there has never heard about this, I've never heard about it until I encountered and witnessed this about 4 years ago. A purple gray smoke that took over the entirety of the valley system. And when you go up on our top hill, you can see about 4 miles to the north, or excuse me, 4 miles to the south. And you can look all the way out there. And a friend of mine and I, in February, about 4 years ago, we were sitting up on that peak and we watched a gray fog, smoke mist. Excuse me, not gray, purple, purple come through the entirety of the valley. It took about an hour for it to get to us. And it took over the entirety of the mountain, the entirety of the valley. And I researched it and I talked with as many people as I could, and only one person helped me make sense of it. If anybody out there's ever seen or witnessed or heard about this, about the, um, I have Cherokee. I've got 3 tribes native in me. I've got Cherokee, Shawnee, and Sioux in me. And the Cherokee, apparently, the ancestral tradition of what I've understood that was told to me by someone that had knowledge about this, was that it was the blessing of your previous ancestral spiritual world coming to you and blessing the land. That's what it was explained to me as. I just telling you that I witnessed it for over an hour, a very thick purple haze, if you will, that permeated and took over the entire valley system. You could actually walk through it and like walk right up to it. It was right there. And I think that there's something very specifically powerful about this place, and I'll disclose more things about this with you if we ever talk more outside of this conversation, and especially in person. The invite is to you, as I mentioned before the interview. This place is special. There's something about it, and I do think that these creatures actually are happy that it is my wife and I that came here and did what we've done here, because I feel like we have a symbiotic relationship where we protect each other, and that this is the biggest outreach of communication that I've ever had, was when it did 4 different types of mimicking my wild calls on the mountainside. That is the most direct thing that's ever happened here for me personally.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I appreciate you for sharing your experiences and your encounters with me. And it gives me a better idea of what's going on around the property.
There's a lot going on, my friend, and like I said, I can only keep it this close because we're not trying to take up 10 hours of somebody's day or night. All you people out there listening, thank you for hearing my story, my tale. It's all true. I have no reason to lie to you or try to convince you of anything that's stupid or outside of logic. I am completely trying to relay to the world, to anyone that is actually a conscious enough believer of understanding that there are people with these experiences that actually think it's valuable for other people to intercept. So, thank you for your time, the audience, and thank you for your time, Miguel. I don't want to take up too much of your day. I know you're busy, and I would be more than happy to extend more to you about everything else, even maybe let you take video out here if you'd like to come out sometime, because I do think this is valuable work, and the people that are listening right now, I wish you nothing but the best, and stay safe. Take care of yourself and your families, and know that there's people out here like myself and my wife that are in the middle of nowhere that are actually living with them and have a symbiotic, friendly relationship with them, and that this is nothing that I'm trying to capitalize or gain off of other than what they're already giving me. I've already capitalized and gained this, so I have nothing else that I'm seeking, and that's what I'm trying to say.
Well, I appreciate that. And every little bit of information counts. And I'm glad I got to speak with you today. And I know today is a special day for you and your wife, so I'm going to let you go now. And if you want to talk more in the future, just feel free to reach back out to me, and we'll see what we can do. And hopefully we can get together.
Well, I will. While I'll have you on the phone, I will quick say this. In October, my wife and I are traveling through Missouri to go to Arkansas, because last year I took her to go find her own crystals for the first time out in Arkansas, and we're going back at the end of October. So if we can possibly revolve around the end of October, we'd be more than happy to meet up with you and do an in-person, in-depth interview as far as anything else that we can actually give you the rest of the story with.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm game for that. And
We'd be happy to meet up with you, like at a state park or something like that, and you can record us, and you can take and run with it what you will. We'll even do a video, like it's okay. Like I'm very thrilled to be able to have the channel to get this out to people to hear. I'm going to be watching for it to come up, when the show airs. But just to be able to share a brief glimpse of 5 years of our experience with this, I hope people can appreciate it. So thank you very much again, Miguel.
all right. Thank you very much, DR, for your time. And we'll talk again more in the future, my friend.
Yes, sir. I'll be in touch.
All right. You have a great day. All right, DR, thank you very much for sharing your Bigfoot encounters and experiences from your homestead property in Kentucky. It sounds like these creatures have adapted to your presence, or they are possibly being territorial and coming in to check things out. It makes me wonder why these things are checking people out, and the only thing that I can really come up with is food sources. I believe their only interest is finding food, and if they're watching people, they're looking for an opportunity to get their next meal, which could be your dog, food that you leave out. And I think that's possibly their only interest, because it doesn't seem like they're wanting to be our friends and shake our hands and hang out with us. They're up to something, and if they wanted to be our forest buddies, they would come out of the woods and show themselves. So I think that's the only logical explanation. But yeah, I appreciate everyone for listening, and until the next one, you guys be safe out in the forest.